Sade was a quiet force in Makuta, a small but busy tech hub. She wasn't loud or flashy, just focused. While others chased clout and likes, she spent her nights building something that really mattered. An education app designed for children in rural communities who had little to no access to good schooling. It wasn't about getting rich or going viral for her. It was about change, real lasting change. Her tiny apartment became her lab. Coffee-stained notebooks, glowing screens, and code filled her nights. She tested features, rewrote lines of code, and even called teachers in remote areas to ask what their students truly needed. She wanted the app to feel like a real classroom, even without walls. She knew this could open doors for thousands of children who had been forgotten by the system. But while Sade worked in silence, someone else was watching. Not cheering her on. Not offering help. Just watching. Not out of admiration, but out of greed. In her office, there was one person who always seemed just a little too interested. He'd stop by her desk often, asking what she was working on. Just curious, he'd say with a smile that never quite reached his eyes. Sade brushed it off. Maybe he was just being friendly. Maybe. What she didn't know was that her quiet dream, built in the shadows with love and late nights, was about to be targeted. And the person she least expected would try to claim it as his own. Chinedu was the kind of guy who always knew how to charm a room. He dressed sharp, laughed loudly, and somehow always ended up on the good side of upper management. Everyone called him the office star. He had that smile, the kind that made people drop their guard. But behind that smile was something else. Something colder. First, Sade didn't think much of it. He started stopping by her desk more often, leaning on the edge casually as she typed. "What are you building?" he'd ask, eyes flicking across her screen. "That code looks intense." She'd give short answers, still focused on her work. "Just an app I'm experimenting with," she'd reply. But the questions kept coming. And they got weirder. "Where do you keep your backups? Who's testing it? What server are you using?" Each time he'd laugh it off if she seemed confused. "Don't mind me," he'd say with that crooked smile. "I'm just curious." But Sade started to feel uneasy. Why was he asking so many specific questions? Why did he seem so interested now, after months of ignoring her project? One afternoon, she came back from a meeting and found her desk slightly off. Her notebook had been moved. Her flash drive wasn't where she left it. A chill ran through her. She wanted to believe it was all in her head. Maybe she was just being paranoid. But deep down, something told her this wasn't innocent. Chinedu wasn't just curious, he was watching, learning, copying. Slowly, silently. Sade had worked so hard to build something meaningful. And now, someone who had never written a line of code for it was circling like a vulture. Smiling. Pretending. Waiting for the right moment to swoop in. What hurt the most wasn't just the fear of losing her work. It was the realization that betrayal sometimes comes dressed in charm and nice cologne. And in a place where everyone smiled and clapped at meetings, no one would believe her. Not yet. 2 days before the big demo, everything felt off. Sade was checking her emails when she noticed something strange. She hadn't received any updates about the meeting she'd been preparing for over the past 6 months. First, she thought it was a mistake. Maybe someone just forgot to copy her in. But then she asked a colleague about the schedule, and the reply hit her like a slap. "Oh, the demo got moved. Didn't you know? It's tomorrow morning now." She froze. No invite. No heads up. Nothing. That night she barely slept. Her stomach was in knots. Something was wrong. She could feel it. The next morning the truth came crashing down. Chinedu, the office star with that fake friendly smile, had walked into the boardroom, her boardroom, and presented her app as if he built it. Her designs. Her code. Her sleepless nights. All of it in his hands. And he didn't blink once. He smiled as he spoke. He explained every feature she had carefully crafted. He even used her test results, her feedback reports, her user interface screenshots. And the worst part? The room clapped. Loudly. The board members nodded with pride. The head of the department shook his hand. They even gave him a standing ovation. By the time Sade found out, the news had spread. Chinedu wowed the board. "He's getting promoted." Her heart sank. She sat at her desk in silence. It wasn't just her work that was stolen. It was her trust, her belief in fairness, in teamwork. She had shared pieces of her dream. thinking they were safe. But they weren't. Sade didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just sat there staring at her screen, the one where she had typed out every line of that app with care. All her effort gone in a flash, handed over by someone who had only watched from the sidelines. She had been stabbed not by a stranger, but by someone who once pretended to be a teammate. And in that moment she realized something painful. Chinedu thought he had one. He was walking around the office like a king, shoulders high, smiling wider than ever. People congratulated him in the hallway, called him sir in meetings, and even asked for advice on how to climb the ladder like he did. But what he didn't know was that the ladder he was standing on was built by Sade, and she held the blueprint. What no one else knew, not even Chinedu, was that just a week before the stolen demo, Sade had been quietly promoted. The international board overseeing the project had seen her dedication, her clean code, her detailed reports, and they made a decision. She was now part of the leadership team. No big announcements, no flashy emails, just a signed contract and a quiet nod from the top. And because of that promotion, something powerful had happened behind the scenes. Sade had signed off on the final funding paperwork for the app. She had also approved, with her own hand, Chinedu's contract extension. His future, without knowing it, was now tied to her signature. She had the receipts. He thought he had erased her, cut her out, taken it all. But he forgot one thing. Real power doesn't always shout. Sometimes it signs documents in quiet rooms and lets the storm come later. Sade sat calmly at her desk while he soaked in his stolen glory. She didn't argue. She didn't post a rant online. She didn't even confront him, not yet, because she knew something he didn't. When the truth would come out, it wouldn't just shake the room. It would flip the whole table. And when it did, it wouldn't be about revenge. It would be about reminding everyone, especially Chinedu, that some people play the long game. The quiet game. The smart game. She didn't need to scream. She had already signed his future. The room was buzzing before she walked in. Quiet whispers, clinking coffee cups, and light laughter. Chinedu was already there, sitting tall at the head of the table like he owned the place. Everyone else seemed relaxed, waiting for the usual routine to begin. But then the door opened. Sade walked in, calm and steady, dressed in a sharp navy blue suit that made everyone sit up a little straighter. She held a file in her hands, thick, neat, and full of truth. No anger on her face, no fear in her eyes. Just quiet confidence. The room fell silent. Chinedu's smile twitched for a moment, but he tried to play it cool. "Oh hey Sade," he said, voice a bit too high like he wasn't sure what was coming. Sade didn't answer right away. She walked to the front of the room, placed her file on the table, and looked around at the faces that had clapped for him just days before. Then in a clear, steady voice she said, "I believe there's been a misunderstanding." She began passing out documents one by one to each board member. Development timelines, source code logs, project notes, testing feedback, all marked with her name, her credentials, her timestamps. Every page was a piece of the story. Her story. No one said a word. She didn't have to explain much. The documents spoke for themselves. Her handwriting on drafts, her email headers, even screenshots of her laptop from weeks ago showing features still being tested. She had proof for everything. Chinedu shifted in his chair, his confidence slowly melting away. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. His silence was louder than any excuse. One of the board members cleared their throat, flipped through the pages and looked at Sade with new eyes. Not just as a developer but as a leader. And in that moment she wasn't just the girl who got overlooked. She was the storm that arrived quietly, not to destroy but to reveal. She didn't yell. She didn't point fingers. She just showed the truth. The silence in the room was heavy. You could feel it thick, awkward, almost like the air had frozen. The board members sat with papers in their hands, flipping through every page Sade had given them. Page after page it was clear. The app wasn't Chinedu's. It never had been. One investor leaned forward, eyes narrowed. "Wait, this prototype isn't even approved for demo yet," he said, tapping the paper. "It's still under internal review." Another added, "And the intellectual property, it's registered under Sade's name. That means," he trailed off, but everyone already knew what it meant. Chinedu tried to speak, but his voice cracked. I thought the team. No, the chairman cut in. His voice was firm. Cold. You presented someone else's work as your own. And worse, you shared a prototype that wasn't legally yours to show. That's a serious violation. All eyes turned to Sade. She stood calmly, still holding the last few documents. No pride on her face, just clarity. She wasn't here to embarrass anyone. She was here to take back what was hers. Then the chairman looked directly at her. His voice softened a little, respectful now. Would you like us to handle this, or shall we? Sade looked at him, then around the room, the same room that had clapped for someone else just days ago. And then quietly she said, let's do this properly. It wasn't anger in her tone. It was strength. She didn't need revenge. She didn't need to shout. She just wanted things made right the honest way. The investors nodded. One of them picked up the phone. Security was called. Chinedu's face went pale. What hit everyone hardest wasn't just that he had lied. It was that he had underestimated her. He thought she was quiet, easy to ignore, easy to steal from. But he forgot that real power doesn't always make noise. Sometimes it just walks in with receipts. And now, that quiet woman he thought he could erase was the one standing in the light. Sade stood there, steady and sure, as the board waited for her answer. And then she smiled, small, calm, powerful. Let's do it properly, she said. That was all it took. Within minutes, security walked into the room. Chinedu's face went blank. He looked around, as if hoping someone would stop what was happening. But no one moved. The same people who once clapped for him now stared in silence. Some even looked away, embarrassed they ever believed his lies. Sir, please come with us, one of the guards said. Chinedu stuttered something under his breath, still trying to save face. But it was over. His badge was taken. His access was revoked. His name was removed from all files. He had walked into the spotlight on stolen steps, and now it was all crumbling beneath him. As the doors closed behind him, the silence in the room broke. One person clapped, then another. And suddenly the boardroom echoed with the kind of applause that wasn't polite. It was real. It was for the woman who had built something from scratch, stayed quiet through the storm, and came out stronger. Sade didn't soak in the praise. She just gave a small nod and sat down. But inside her heart was racing. Not from nerves but from relief. Justice had finally arrived. Not loud. Not cruel. Just right. Someone leaned over and whispered, "You handled that like a boss." She smiled, this time wider. Not because she needed the praise but because she knew who she was now. No more hiding in the shadows. No more stolen credit. The tables had turned, and this time she was at the head of the table, where she belonged. Outside that room the whispers would spread fast. People would talk. Some would feel sorry for Chinedu. Others would laugh. But no one would forget the moment Sade stood up, said 6 quiet words, and turned the whole game around. In the end she didn't just win. She owned the room. The news came just a week later, but to Sade it felt like the beginning of something much bigger. She was officially named Director of Tech Innovation. Not just for her company but for the entire regional arm of the organization. It wasn't just a title. It was trust, respect, and recognition for the work she had quietly done for years. The same work that had once been ignored, dismissed, or nearly stolen. People clapped when the announcement was made. This time it wasn't forced or fake. It was proud. Genuine. Even those who had once overlooked her couldn't deny what she had earned. But Sade didn't waste time basking in the spotlight. The same day she got the title she asked one simple question. Can I build my own team? The board gave her a full yes, budget approved, no questions asked. Her first move wasn't to hire top Ivy League grads or flashy tech brothers. Instead, she started something that came straight from the heart. A mentorship program for young women in STEM across West Africa. She knew how hard it had been for her to break through. The lonely nights. The second-guessing. The rooms full of people who didn't take her seriously. She didn't want the next generation to feel that same struggle. So she built a bridge. She reached out to universities, tech hubs, and rural schools. She offered training, internship paths, scholarships, and real one-on-one mentorship with women already working in the industry. It wasn't just about coding. It was about confidence. Soon her inbox was full. Not with complaints or gossip, but with hopeful messages from young girls who had never believed they could belong in tech until now. Sade had climbed the ladder quietly. She could have pulled it up behind her. But instead she turned around and lowered a hand. Because real leadership isn't about standing at the top alone. It's about lifting others with you. And in doing that, Sade wasn't just creating apps anymore. She was building a legacy. After everything that happened, people kept asking Sade the same question. Why didn't you sue him? They couldn't understand it. Chinedu had stolen her work, taken credit, lied to everyone, and tried to erase her completely. Most people said they would have dragged him to court, made a public example out of him, maybe even destroyed his career. But Sade always gave the same calm answer. Sometimes success is the loudest justice. She meant it. For her, it was never about revenge. It was about rising above it and proving that integrity still mattered. That you could win without playing dirty. She didn't need to ruin Chinedu's name. He had done that all on his own. She didn't post about it online. She didn't trash him in interviews. She didn't need to. Instead, she poured all her energy into her new role. She was sharper, stronger, more focused than ever before. Her days were filled with planning new features, building her dream team, and expanding the mentorship program that was already changing lives across West Africa. And while she moved forward, Chinedu faded quietly into the background. No one talked about him anymore. His name wasn't mentioned in meetings. The applause had stopped. People saw the truth now, not just because of what Sade had said, but because of what she had done. She didn't need to fight dirty to win. She showed the world what quiet power looked like. And the best part? She still smiled the same way. Still kind. Still humble. But there was something different in her eyes. A deeper strength, a quiet fire. She had been betrayed, yes. But she hadn't been broken. She didn't need revenge to feel whole again. Her dignity stayed intact and her purpose? Even clearer. In the end, Sade's story became more than a comeback. It became a lesson. That real power doesn't always yell. And real justice doesn't always need a courtroom. Sometimes the best way to answer betrayal is to succeed so loudly it drowns out the lies. Months passed. The office moved on, projects grew, and Sade kept building. Her mentorship program was thriving, her team was expanding, and her app, the one they all once doubted, was now being used in classrooms across rural areas. And somewhere out there, Chinedu was job hunting. He had been quiet since the day he was escorted out. No big goodbye, no dramatic exit speech. Just silence. But now he needed work, a second chance, maybe even a fresh start. So he updated his resume, polished his LinkedIn, and started applying. His credentials looked great on paper, until companies did what they always do, called for a reference. And each time they called the same person. Sade. The woman he once tried to erase. The one he thought would stay small, stay quiet. The girl who had built something with her bare hands, only to watch him steal it, now sat in the seat of power. She didn't have to say much. Her name alone was enough. When companies heard she was the one he'd wronged, the conversation usually ended there. It wasn't revenge. It was reality. Chinedu had tried to take her future. Now, without meaning to, she held his. Sade didn't gloat. She didn't block his chances. She just told the truth when asked, with honesty, not hate. Because in the end he had written his story. And she had rewritten hers. The girl he once underestimated? She now signed the checks.